thought it was something out of a movie. It just didn't seem real.
Police officer told everybody to form a human chain, and we held on to each other.
Blew out the plaza we were on, hitting the building. It was surreal.
I think it's going to change a lot of our mindsets.
You know, it's unreal. I can't believe it.
Our country, our individual lives will be indelibly changed by the events of the last 27 hours.
Good evening, I'm Tim Nelson. Thanks for joining us for Carolina Week.
And I'm Brigida Mack. September 11th is a day that will be remembered forever. A massive terrorist attack against the United States. Tens of thousands killed, a nation in mourning.
The tragedy hits home at UNC Chapel Hill as an ordinary day becomes a day that will go down in history. Carolina Week brings you team coverage of this event with a look at how students are dealing with tragedy.
We'll show you how the campus is responding by helping with relief efforts. And we'll talk to a terrorism expert about who may be responsible.
We'll also talk to a foreign policy expert about what's next for the U.S. But we begin with a timeline of events as they unfolded in the Northeast and here in Chapel Hill. A nation waits for answers as the death toll rises. In the aftermath of a terrorist attack, students at UNC Chapel Hill try to gather their thoughts and make sense of a day of tragedy unlike any other in U.S. history. Carolina Week's Nicole Brusick has a timeline of the events.
And just blew out the plaza we were on.
The police officer told everybody to form a human chain. People are laying all over the floor. It's horrible.
About 8:45 Tuesday morning, a plane crashes into the World Trade Center in New York City.
We thought it was something out of a movie. It just didn't seem real.
As people in New York run from the blazing skyscraper, students here at Carolina are drawn to TV sets and the images broadcast on every station. Just after 9 in the morning, a second plane slams into the second Trade Center tower, and a student begins to cry. There are crowds at televisions across campus as the most severe terrorist attack on U.S. soil unfolds. 1 hour after the crashes into the Trade Center towers, a third plane strikes the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Emergency crews work quickly to get people away from the Trade Center. At 10 a.m., the first tower collapses, trapping hundreds of rescue workers and an unknown number of civilians.
Fell and just hit and just blew out the plaza we were on.
While 3 hijacked commercial airliners have hit their targets, a fourth plane dives to the ground south of Pittsburgh. The second trade tower is on the verge of collapse. Classes at Keenan Flagler Business School are canceled.
Kind of like, oh my gosh, it's so surreal. Like, you don't really realize what's going on. But then when they came in and canceled classes, it kind of all hit us.
Associate Dean Julie Collins checks her email for information about Carolina alumni working in New York. At 10:29, the New York skyline is changed forever with the fall of the second tower. Tar Heel members of the ROTC watch smoke and ash choke the Manhattan streets and consider the possibility of personal involvement.
We're going to be defending our country, you know, and that's a big responsibility, you know.
Some say it's a country already at war. In Chapel Hill, I'm Nicole Brusick, Carolina Week.
UNC Chapel Hill political science professor Mark Crescenzi is an expert about terrorist groups and activities. Crescenzi teaches a graduate class about national security. Like others, he thinks Osama bin Laden is the most likely suspect. He says Tuesday's attack represents a huge victory for terrorists, and for that reason, he doesn't foresee any other attacks in the near future.
You are this terrorist, you put yourself in their position. They are, you know, it's a horrible thought, but they are enjoying remarkable success in their efforts, right? Unparalleled success. And I'm not sure you can improve on that. And so I can't see really a motivation for additional terrorist acts, aside from just wanton violence.
Carolina Week caught up with Crescenzi just moments after he received word that his brother, who was working across the street from the World Trade Center during the attack, had gotten out of the city safely.
After yesterday's hijackings, the notion that flying is the safest way to travel was put into question. Former RDU airport worker Richard Rogers Jr. says airport security is hardly secure.
I don't believe I would have any problem whatsoever either carrying a package of almost unlimited size into practically any aircraft on any ramp at the airport, nor do I believe that one who would be so inclined would have any problem in paying someone who currently works at the airport to do the same.
Rogers says he was never afraid to fly until he worked at the airport. Raleigh-based Midway Airlines has shut down its operations. The airline was already struggling financially and said it wouldn't be able to recover from Tuesday's hijackings. More than 1,700 employees were immediately laid off. The company says ticket holders will receive refunds or transfers.
As airport security is called into question, Americans have to wonder if this tragedy could have been prevented.
Foreign policy expert Timothy McEwen joins us live to discuss the government's role in the tragedy. Mr. McEwen, thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
Well, some of the stuff we've heard is that the government may have had some forewarning about the tragedy. Was there a military intelligence failure here?
It's possible that they did have some forewarning, but you have to keep in mind that there are threats confronting the United States all the time, and it's not obvious which threat is the serious one. I think also you have to remember that in an open society, a small group of people who are very well trained and have a very good plan can move in and out very quickly, and the chances of them being detected are not good.
Okay, and people in the Middle East are also saying that our foreign policy in the Middle East may be a reason for why this happened. Do you think that our foreign policy is to blame?
Well, it's obvious that a lot of people in the Middle East, particularly Arabs, don't like U.S. policy towards the region and don't like the close relationships between the United States and Israel. But there are a lot of people who don't like U.S. foreign policy who don't do these kinds of things. I think if U.S. foreign policy had been different, the events of the last 20 or 25 years would have been different too. But I think that's a separate issue from what happened yesterday.
Professor McEwen, this is obviously an event unlike any other in U.S. history. What does the U.S. government do now?
I think one thing that needs to be kept in mind that hasn't been talked about much is that very likely what's happened is that the rules for covert operations by U.S. intelligence agencies and military forces have probably been changed within the last 24 hours. I think that a lot of attention has been given to beefing up the intelligence system, and that will probably be done. But that will take some time. I think these other changes, which are probably never going to be publicized, are probably much more important in the short run.
Okay, Professor McEwen, we want to thank you so much for taking the time and joining us.
You're welcome.
As the nation begins the decision process on which steps need to take place next, the university community also looks toward moving on. Carolina Week's Joe Disney tells us how the university begins the healing process.
More than 24 hours after one of the most tragic days in the history of the United States, the nation tries to deal with the pain and the loss. Here at UNC, students, faculty, and members of the Chapel Hill community gathered Wednesday afternoon in Polk Place to reflect and remember.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
People sang, and leaders from the university and community spoke, but it was the silence that brought the most peace. Thousands of people gathered to hear messages of reflection.
Carolina, be strong and help each other. Our lives will never be the same, but these attempts to divide us will only bring us all together.
And action.
I think an important part of the healing process is to do something about what has happened, feeling like you are making a difference and being productive.
Agarwal is part of a team of Carolina students collecting emergency funds and promoting donations of time and blood. In the end, however, it will be the Carolina community acting as one, helping and supporting one another that will heal but not cure UNC from this tragic time.
I want you to remember that no matter where your loved ones are now, you have a family here at Carolina.
In Chapel Hill, I'm Joe Disney, Carolina Week.
University officials are working hard to maintain a sense of stability in the face of crisis, coming to grips with the anger and grief started at the student union. Carolina Week's Jane Murphy has more.
UNC Chapel Hill Chancellor James Measer spoke to students Tuesday afternoon and expressed a desire that the university unite in support of the country.
I hope by being here together we can offer some comfort to each other, as well as to come together in a moment of solidarity for our fellow Americans.
Measer challenged students to celebrate our nation's values and recognize that those values are under attack, but urged them not to retaliate in a spirit of hate.
But in defending our freedom and defending our values, It would be even more tragic if we gave way to the very kinds of hatred that led to these despicable acts. If we became like the people who did this thing, then they would have won a double victory.
Meeser gave a final plea to students to volunteer their time and give their blood to help those who survived the attacks in Washington and New York. In Chapel Hill, I'm Jane Murphy, Carolina Week.
Members of the Carolina community are doing what they can to help the victims of Tuesday's tragedy. At Berry Hill Hall on the campus of UNC Chapel Hill, the Red Cross turned away people by the dozens today from what was supposed to have been a routine blood drive. The event was scheduled more than a month ago. At this location, the Red Cross would normally receive about 35 pints of blood, but after yesterday's tragedy, they anticipate more than 100. Volunteers say they've seen donors come from as far away as High Point, North Carolina.
Moved here from New York last month, so got a lot of friends and family who been affected by this, and any small thing we can do to help.
If you weren't able to give blood today, the Red Cross has more blood drives scheduled in the next 3 weeks. UNC Chapel Hill students and their community continue to be affected by the attack on America. As students come to grips with the greatest tragedy of their generation, it's a time for unity, peace, and prayer. It's the kind of horror you hope you never have to face. But for hundreds of Carolina students, it's now a reality.
It was really horrifying. I mean, I got this really terrible feeling in my stomach. It was just kind of like it knotted up. It's just horrifying to think that somebody could actually do something against the United States like that.
But they could see it happen. Gathered around TVs in the pit, the union, the journalism school, unable to believe the sights and sounds before them, ears glued to cell phones, desperate for word from loved ones. There was prayer, hugs, and comfort as students rallied around those in need.
I think it already has brought a lot of us together. You can look at any TV on campus and see that people are affected by it. People have family up there.
Get through it and grow, and learn, and become aware of our nation's vulnerability.
I think it's going to change a lot of our mindsets, and now we have a sort of national consciousness about what can happen to us on a daily basis. This could happen here. This could have been the bell tower that, a plane ran into. This could be anywhere.
With many students' families far away, campus groups provide a home away from home. Carolina Week's Regina Willis shows us how campus groups are bringing students together.
Under a flag flying at half-staff, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship organized a prayer group in Polk Place Tuesday. InterVarsity staff member Brian Wilcox says he needed to connect with other Christians when he heard about the massive terrorist attack on American soil.
I just felt like I needed to spend time with other folks, coming together in prayer and just asking Him for direction and, and for a greater sense of hope in what seems like a hopeless situation.
Campus-wide co-president Liza Potter sees the advantage of belonging to campus organizations in a time of tragedy.
You have a smaller group, a group that knows your name and who knows who you are, where you can go and talk about these things and discuss it in an atmosphere with people who believe the same things that you do and feel the same way that you do.
While individual groups are important for students while coping with this unexpected tragedy, student leaders say what's most important is that different groups on campus understand each other and unite as a university community.
Some students are concerned that certain ethnic groups will be blamed. Though many fingers are already pointing to Islamic terrorist groups, Nira Mikwana, the co-president of a multicultural group on campus, believes it's important that students don't jump to conclusions.
Tensions on our campus went from being black and white to being Islamic and American. And that's a horrible way to look at things, but that is probably the way a lot of people are feeling right now.
Omar Halawa is a member of the UNC Arab Club. He says that he's lucky to be in a community that's generally accepting, but is worried about the dangers of stereotyping.
It should be known that Arabs here on campus, Arab Americans at UNC Chapel Hill, at the community, we firmly condemn what was happened today as an act of violence.
Whether part of a campus group or just the university group as a whole, UNC Chapel Hill students are looking to each other to get through a very difficult period. In Chapel Hill, I'm Regina Willis, Carolina Week.
Several discussions among various groups are being planned for next week.
For students expecting family, the university's Family Weekend events will still be held as scheduled. But university officials have yet to determine whether the football game will be a part of the festivities. Check the Carolina Week website for updates at www.carolinaweek.org.
You're watching Carolina Week and our team coverage of the terrorist attack on the United States. Our other big story this week is another sad story. A UNC Chapel Hill student found dead in his apartment. We'll have that team coverage in just a moment.
As we take a quick break, we offer a moment of silent reflection on the timeline of the doomed flights that left Boston, Newark, and Greater D.C.
Carolina Week continues after this. Our other big story of the week is the death of a UNC Chapel Hill student.
Carolina Week learned of Daniel Walker's death about dinner time Friday evening. That's when our team and exclusive coverage began, led by Carolina Week's Michelle Muscatello.
Daniel Walker lived with his friends in Carborough. He died in his attic bedroom sometime early Friday morning. Neighbor Felicia Rocky spoke first with Carolina Week, saying the tragedy was shocking.
I saw them actually bring somebody out on a gurney. They were like in one of those white bag things. And I wasn't, you know how you think, God, couldn't possibly be a body because there's young people that live here.
But it was the body of a young person. 20-year-old Walker, a senior at UNC Chapel Hill majoring in journalism and economics, found dead in his Pine Hill Drive home by a roommate. The father of another roommate spoke exclusively with Carolina Week Friday night.
He didn't see Daniel last night when he came in and just went to bed. But a roommate tried to wake him up this morning. He's dead.
Later that night, Carborough police issued a brief statement saying the student's death may be drug-related and that those drugs may have been tainted. Roommates tell police the drugs may have been bought on or near the Carolina campus. All this as Walker's Sigma Nu fraternity brothers gathered behind closed doors to grieve.
By Monday, police began piecing together a timeline of Walker's last night alive, a night that began here at the fraternity house on Columbia Road. Police say Walker spent several hours at the fraternity, and they say alcohol consumption was taking place.
Walker then headed to a friend's house and finally home.
We are not sure what killed this young man, and we want to know.
Carrboro police found part of a pill and a white powdery substance on Walker's desk. They say the powder is not cocaine. And while the true cause of his death won't be known until toxicology tests come back, maybe as long as 2 months from now, police say the drug OxyContin may be involved. In Chapel Hill, I'm Michelle Muscatello, Carolina Week.
Known as the poor man's heroin, OxyContin comes from the same narcotic family as Percocet and Percodan. Carolina Week's Melissa Sowery tells us more about this popular new street drug.
The abuse of the prescription drug OxyContin is becoming a major problem. But it's the strength and duration of OxyContin that make it attractive to both users and abusers.
There is a very lucrative end for people who obtain it illegally or legally and sell it.
A time-release drug, it works over 12 hours. According to pharmacist Stephen Garthy, altering how it's supposed to be used is where the real danger lies.
If you inhale it or sniff it up your nose, it goes directly to your bloodstream and out to your body. So you get more of the drug if you take the same size tablet, or use the same one tablet.
More of the drug, more of a high, and if taken in large dosages, the user's breathing and heart rate will slow down. Death is a possible result. Because it's an addictive drug, pharmacists lock up OxyContin. In Chapel Hill, I'm Melissa Sowery, Carolina Week.
Police say while locked up, OxyContin is getting into the wrong hands through break-ins and theft, counterfeit prescriptions, or people stealing the pills from patients taking it by order of their doctors.
It's too soon to know how Daniel Walker may have gotten OxyContin or if that's the cause of his death. For his friends, though, it's not about how he died that matters, but how he lived.
He attacked life head on. He didn't back down from anything. He was always chasing his dreams.
But Daniel Walker's life and those dreams of one day running his own business were cut short. His friendships were cut short too.
I didn't have to say anything like, Daniel, man, I'm having a crappy day. I didn't have to say that. You know, he knew.
Seth Shore lived with Walker.
He always tried to be my big brother, and it really irked me, like, sort of like I had another mom sometimes. I was just like, man, get off my back. But I really appreciated it when it came down to it. He was just trying to look out for everybody.
Hunter Ogletree and Walker had been friends since their high school days in Hendersonville. He remembers how Walker helped a friend of theirs through her hard times when she needed it most.
I was always there and always caring for that person. And, you know, I think she said it too, and I'll say it too. You know, maybe if it wasn't for Daniel, then this friend of ours maybe would not be here today.
Friends say Walker was there for the fun times, too.
He attacked everything he did with that smile. He said confidence. Sometimes he was a little bit cocky, but yeah, that's what we loved him for.
But in the classroom, Walker let his work do the talking. Walker was in Sue Alessandri's advertising class last fall. She specifically remembers Walker's final project.
The craftsmanship was unbelievable. It was the best in the class. It's really sad that someone who did have so much creative potential is gone.
Gone, but not forgotten.
I'm going to remember that smirk. You know, seeing him at the funeral home, you know, in the casket, I realized how alive he was. You know, it took death to stop Daniel. That was the only thing that could have stopped him.
Students and faculty are coming together after so much loss, nationally and here at Carolina.
And as the days go on, we all need help coping with tragedy. UNC Chapel Hill psychologist Andrea Hassong is here to offer some advice about dealing with the events of this devastating last week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, here we were just talking about a death in the community. What are some of the likely effects that students and others might be feeling about such a death?
Well, there's a variety of different reactions people might be having, depending on how much they know him, know Daniel, and are familiar with him. And so they range from having no strong feelings, so kind of feeling numb or feeling overwhelmed by it, to having strong feelings of anxiety or depression, maybe irritability and anger. So there's a whole range of feelings you may be having. In addition, there are physical symptoms that they may be having in reaction to different types of trauma. So they'd be having a hard time sleeping, might be having a lot of fatigue, feeling very tired during the day, not just from not sleeping, but from the emotional overwhelmingness of the traumas. They may also have a hard time concentrating, especially students trying to get assignments in, having appetite changes, and having headaches and stomach aches. So it's a variety of different reactions people might be having, and they may be having many of these or very few of them.
Okay.
We're also going to talk about what sort of loss the Carolina community might be experiencing. We've got loss of a classmate and a friend.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's important is the more stresses that we have or more traumas we experience at once, of course, the harder that can be for us, and the longer we should give ourselves to respond to that and to cope with that.
Kind of along with that sort of thinking, is it more important for students who are struggling through the local and the national tragedies to kind of keep plugging along almost as if nothing's happened? Or should they just take a step back from everything? How should they deal with this?
Well, for students, this is going to be variable. For some students, it's going to feel better to make sure you're doing those things that you do every day and to continue on with your normal routine, but you may alter that routine. You may want to make sure that you take breaks so that things aren't so intense for you. You may want to make sure that you give yourself time to deal with things. So probably a combination of those is going to depend on the person.
And I know that faculty and advisors are also dealing with the same kind of questions. I talked to a friend of mine yesterday who said that her Spanish teacher is still going to give her exam tomorrow as it was scheduled. Should teachers be slowing down and taking a step back too, or should they just go as if things are routine?
I think that a lot of the faculty are doing what I've done as well in my classes, and that is seeing where your students are and seeing what's happening with your students, giving them a chance to check in and see how they're doing, but also trying to continue with some of what's normal in the classroom, because there's a lot of time for us to worry about this, and that gives us some normal activities to be engaging in.
And I guess bringing it back to the scope of the last 24 hours, the tragedy, the terrorist attack, what sort of loss may students be experiencing? Because all of us knew someone who had friends and family, in that tragedy.
Well, I think some of the ways people might be feeling are very similar to the reactions they might be having to Daniel's loss. So some of those same reactions might be feeling, and that sense of being overwhelmed, of maybe feeling very numb, might change into feeling more irritable or more depressed as you move on. So that whole range of your normal.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Friends of Daniel Walker are trying to organize a memorial service to be held on campus this weekend. Already scheduled, a peace vigil in the pit to commemorate our other big story this week, the terrorist attack on the United States. Hundreds are dead, the nation scarred, and the victims and their families and friends will be in the prayers of UNC Chapel Hill community members gathering at noon on the steps of Wilson Library for the rest of the week.
That does it for this edition of Carolina Week.
Thank you for joining us as we begin another year of reporting on the university and the university community. Be sure to watch next week when we return to our normal format that includes coverage of Carolina sports and weather.
Until then, have a good night and a good week.
If you have a story idea, contact Carolina Week at 843-8292. You can also visit us online at ibiblio.org/CW. If you have questions about this program, write Carolina Week at Campus Box 3365, UNCCH, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, 27599.